From a superhero costume literally misspelled on screen to a bitter casting war that triggered a lawsuit, the short-lived 1967 sitcom Captain Nice hides secrets far stranger than its bumbling hero. This forgotten NBC show featured promotional art by Jack Kirby, sparked drug panic during the summer of love, and launched careers while destroying others, all in just 15 chaotic episodes. Fact 1. Buck Henry cast William Daniels. From a movie poster. Sometimes casting happens in the most unexpected ways, and that's exactly what occurred with Captain Nice. Buck Henry, the creator of the show and the mastermind behind Get Smart, had already written the lead role of Carter Nash with a specific face in mind. But there was just one problem. He couldn't remember the actor's name. Henry knew exactly what kind of performer he wanted for his bumbling superhero sitcom, someone who could play the nerdy, glasses-wearing chemist who transforms into an equally awkward crime fighter, but the name remained frustratingly out of reach. Then one day, while simply walking past a movie theater, Henry glanced at a lobby card for the film 1,000 Clowns, and there he was, William Daniels, wearing thick-rimmed glasses and looking exactly like Clark Kent. In that moment, everything clicked for Henry. This was his Captain Nice. The irony is that Henry had been thinking about Daniels all along, had even crafted the character around what he imagined this actor could bring to the role, but it took a random movie poster to jog his memory and finally put a name to the face. Daniels got the part and went on to film the pilot before heading to Paris to shoot Two for the Road, and he was even briefly involved with preliminary work on the Katharine Hepburn Broadway musical Coco before learning that NBC had greenlit Captain Nice for a full series. Fact 2. The costume was literally misspelled on screen. In what has to be one of the most embarrassing production errors in television history, Captain Nice's superhero costume featured a glaring spelling mistake that actually made it to air. The costume, which was lovingly sewn by Carter Nash's domineering mother in the show's storyline, had the words Captain Nice emblazoned across the chest in blue letters, except it didn't quite say Captain Nice at first. The original costume actually read Captain, without the second A, a mistake that somehow slipped past everyone involved in the production during the early episodes. The costume itself was already intentionally ridiculous, consisting of white pajamas adorned with gold stars, red stripes on the pants, and an oversized red and blue cape, all designed to make the hero look as unheroic as possible. But the misspelling added an unintentional layer of comedy that the show probably didn't need. Once someone finally noticed the error, the production team attempted to fix it by adding a smaller letter A to correct the spelling, but the damage was already done. Some episodes that had already been filmed and aired still featured the misspelled version, meaning viewers actually saw a superhero running around with his name spelled wrong on his chest, which perfectly captured the bumbling, low-budget nature of the show itself. Fact 3. CBS threatened NBC with a lawsuit over the show. The production of Captain Nice was thrown into chaos before it even began when CBS threatened NBC with legal action over the show's very existence. According to William Daniels in his autobiography, the cast was just beginning rehearsals for this Superman spoof when CBS suddenly claimed that Buck Henry had stolen the entire concept from them and threatened to file a lawsuit against NBC. The timing of this accusation was particularly strange because both networks were developing nearly identical superhero comedy shows at roughly the same time, which seems to happen surprisingly often in Hollywood when competing networks get wind of each other's projects. CBS was working on their own bumbling superhero sitcom called Mr. Terrific, which featured a mild-mannered gas station attendant who gained superpowers by taking a pill, while NBC had Captain Nice, about a mild-mannered chemist who gained superpowers by drinking a formula. The lawsuit ultimately went nowhere and was dropped without any real consequences, but what happened next makes the whole situation even more bizarre. Instead of backing down or rescheduling, both networks decided to go ahead and premiere their competing superhero shows on the exact same night, Monday, January 9, 1967, with Mr. Terrific airing at 8 p.m. on CBS and Captain Nice following at 8:30 p.m. on NBC, creating what Daniels later described as the networks committing mutual suicide by forcing viewers to choose between two nearly indistinguishable shows. Act 4. The actor who tested for Captain Nice got the rival show. Instead, the casting process for Captain Nice led to one of the most awkward situations in television history, when the actor who didn't get the part ended up starring in the competing show instead. Stephen Strimple, who was a darling of the New York theater community at the time, was flown out to Hollywood specifically to screen test for the role of Carter Nash on Captain Nice. And Buck Henry was seriously considering casting him as an unknown lead for the series. However, Henry ultimately decided to go with William Daniels instead, leaving Strimple without the job he'd traveled across the country to audition for. But here's where things get messy. Jack Arnold, the producer of the rival CBS show Mr. Terrific, somehow got his hands on Strimple's screen test for Captain Nice and immediately saw potential in the young actor. Arnold hired Strimple on the spot to play Stanley Beamish, the lead role in Mr. Terrific, which was essentially the same type of bumbling superhero character he had auditioned to play on the NBC show. Arnold even admitted openly to TV Guide that he had essentially stolen NBC's actor, which only added fuel to the already tense rivalry between the two networks and their dueling superhero sitcoms. The situation became even more complicated because both shows went into production at roughly the same time, making the whole casting controversy part of the larger battle between Captain Nice and Mr. Terrific. Fact 5. Alice Ghostly played William Daniels' mother, but was only 4 years older. One of the strangest casting decisions in Captain Nice was having Alice Ghostly play the domineering mother of William Daniels' character Carter Nash, despite the fact that she was only 3 to 4 years older than Daniels in real life. Ghostly was born in 1926, while Daniels was born in 1927, making their actual age difference barely noticeable. Yet she was tasked with convincingly portraying his overbearing, mother-knows-best parent who pushes him into his crime-fighting career. The show made no attempt to age her up significantly with makeup or costuming, which meant viewers were essentially watching a woman who could have been Carter's older sister bossing him around and sewing his superhero pajamas like a typical sitcom mom. Despite the oddity of the casting, Ghostly brought her signature comedic energy to the role, playing Mrs. Nash as the real power, not just in the household, but in the entire city, constantly nagging her adult son to go out and fight crime whether he wanted to or not. Her performance on Captain Nice was memorable enough that it helped launch her into more prominent roles, and she went on to find real fame just a year later when she joined the cast of Bewitched as Esmeralda, the nervous and accident-prone witch, and later became beloved as Bernice Clifton on the comedy Designing Women in the 1980s. Fact 6. The father was an inside joke about a famous character actor. Captain Nice featured one of the cleverest casting jokes in television history, and it involved a man whose face appeared in literally hundreds of Hollywood films. Byron Folger was one of those character actors who everyone recognized even if they didn't know his name, having appeared in countless movies since the 1930s, playing everything from hotel clerks to bank tellers to nervous shopkeepers. His wispy mustache and unworried demeanor made him instantly identifiable to anyone who watched classic Hollywood films, which is exactly why the producers of Captain Nice cast him as Carter Nash's father, and then deliberately hid him behind a newspaper for the entire run of the series. The running gag was that Mr. Nash would sit in his chair, always silent and always holding up a newspaper that completely blocked his face from view, and he often couldn't even remember his own son's name. The joke worked on two levels. For casual viewers, it was simply a funny bit about a henpecked father who had completely checked out of family life. But for film buffs and industry insiders, it was hilarious that one of Hollywood's most ubiquitous and recognizable faces had been rendered completely unrecognizable. The show was essentially taking an actor famous for being seen everywhere and making sure the audience never actually saw him, turning Folger's trademark visibility into a clever sight gag that rewarded anyone who knew exactly who was hiding behind that newspaper. Fact 7. Both superhero spoofs died on The Fugitive's historic finale date. In one of the most unfortunate scheduling coincidences in television history, both Captain Nice and Mr. Terrific aired their final episodes on August 28, 1967, which just happened to be the exact same night that The Fugitive broadcast its series finale on ABC. The timing couldn't have been worse for the two struggling superhero sitcoms, because The Fugitive's finale became a cultural phenomenon that drew 78 million viewers, making it the highest-rated television episode in history up to that point. To put that number in perspective, 45.9% of all American households with a television set tuned in to watch Dr. Richard Kimball finally catch the one-armed man who killed his wife, which meant that more than 7 out of every 10 televisions that were turned on that night were watching The Fugitive. The finale was such a massive event that it essentially crushed everything else on television that evening, and both Captain Nice and Mr. Terrific were already running as reruns by that point after being canceled earlier in the year. Along with the Western satire F Troop, which also aired its last episode that same night, these shows were completely dethroned in the ratings by The Fugitive's historic finale, ending their runs with barely anyone watching because the entire country was focused on one of the biggest television events of the decade. Fact 8. The show was allegedly canceled due to Summer of Love. Drug panic. According to television legend, the real reason Captain Nice and Mr. Terrific were canceled had nothing to do with ratings and everything to do with the cultural panic surrounding drug use during the infamous Summer of Love in 1967. Both shows featured heroes who gained their superpowers by ingesting experimental substances. Carter Nash drank a special chemical formula he called Super Juice to become Captain Nice, while Stanley Beamish took a power pill to transform into Mr. Terrific, and this became a serious problem as the shows continued to air in reruns throughout that summer. The Summer of Love brought drug culture into the forefront of public consciousness, with psychedelic drugs like LSD becoming associated with the counterculture movement, and parent organizations began pressuring the networks to pull the plug on shows that seemed to normalize the idea of taking substances to alter one's state. The concern was that these shows, which were primarily watched by children, were sending a dangerous message about ingesting pills and potions to gain power or solve problems, even though the context was obviously silly and harmless. However, this story should be taken with a grain of salt, because Universal later re-edited several episodes of Mr. Terrific into a TV movie called The Pill Caper, which suggests the networks weren't quite as concerned about the drug angle as the legend claims. Fact 9. Buck Henry got the star's roles in The Graduate. When Captain Nice failed to find an audience and was canceled after just one season, creator Buck Henry made sure his stars didn't walk away empty-handed by securing them roles in what would become one of the most iconic films of the 1960s. Henry had co-written the screenplay for The Graduate alongside Calder Willingham, adapting it from Charles Webb's novel, and he used his influence on the production to bring both William Daniels and Alice Ghostly into the film as a form of consolation for the disappointment of Captain Nice. Daniels landed the role of Mr. Braddock, the father of Dustin Hoffman's character Benjamin Braddock, and his performance as the befuddled, well-meaning suburban dad became one of the memorable supporting roles in the film. Ghostly also appeared in The Graduate in a smaller part, adding to the Captain Nice reunion within this critically acclaimed production. The film went on to be nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Adapted Screenplay for Henry and Willingham, and it became a massive cultural phenomenon that defined a generation's anxiety about conformity and the future. Henry himself also appeared in the film in a supporting role as a hotel desk clerk, making The Graduate something of a Captain Nice cast reunion, though in a far more successful and prestigious project than the short-lived superhero sitcom that had brought them all together in the first place. Fact 10. Grant Tinker hired William Daniels for future shows because he loved Captain Nice. Although Captain Nice lasted only 15 episodes and is largely forgotten today, it ended up having a major impact on William Daniels' career thanks to one powerful fan who never forgot the show. Grant Tinker, who was a producer and executive at NBC during Captain Nice's brief run, became such a devoted fan of the series that he made a mental note to work with Daniels again whenever the opportunity arose. Years later, when Tinker was in a position to cast major television projects, he specifically sought out Daniels because he remembered how much he had enjoyed his performance as the bumbling superhero. This admiration led directly to Daniels landing the role of the voice of KTT, the artificially intelligent talking car in Knight Rider, which ran from 1982 to 1986 and became one of the most iconic shows of the decade. Tinker also brought Daniels into St. Elsewhere, the acclaimed medical drama where Daniels played the brilliant but abrasive surgeon Dr. Mark Craig, a role that would define his career and earn him widespread critical recognition. Daniels won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series for his work on St. Elsewhere, taking home the trophy in both 1985 and 1986, proving that sometimes a failed superhero sitcom can be the unexpected launching pad for a distinguished and award-winning television career. Fact 11. The show had Jack Kirby promotional art. Despite being a low-budget sitcom that lasted barely half a season, Captain Nice received the royal treatment when it came to promotional materials, thanks to the involvement of one of the most legendary artists in comic book history. Jack Kirby, the co-creator of iconic Marvel superheroes like Captain America, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and the Hulk, was commissioned to create promotional artwork for Captain Nice that was featured in commercials advertising the show. This was during Kirby's peak years at Marvel in the mid-1960s, when he was revolutionizing the superhero genre and creating the visual template that would define comic books for generations to come. So having him work on artwork for a silly superhero parody was both an honor and somewhat ironic. The show received significant marketing support beyond just Kirby's artwork, including a tie-in novel written by William Johnston, who had authored 9 Get Smart novels, along with books based on The Munsters, The Brady Bunch, and Welcome Back, Kotter. Captain Nice also got its own one-shot comic book adaptation published by Gold Key Comics in November of 1967, with interior art drawn by Joe Certa, who was best known as the co-creator of the Martian Manhunter for DC Comics. The comic featured Captain Nice facing off against a villain called the Rooster in a story that captured the genial silliness of the television show. Fact 12. Alan Young was originally cast in the rival show, then mysteriously dropped. The casting history of Mr. Terrific includes one of the most puzzling and contentious decisions in television production, involving an actor who had just come off a major hit series. Alan Young, who had starred as Wilbur Post on the beloved sitcom Mr. Ed for 6 seasons until 1966, was the original choice to play Stanley Beamish, the mild-mannered gas station attendant who transforms into Mr. Terrific by taking a power pill. Young actually filmed a complete pilot episode for Mr. Terrific in 1966, which featured an entirely different supporting cast, including Edward Andrews as the Chief, along with several other actors who would not appear in the final version that made it to air. However, for reasons that have never been fully explained, CBS decided to drop Young and completely overhaul the show before it premiered, recasting the lead role with Stephen Strimple and bringing in a new ensemble of supporting players. The pilot that Young filmed was never broadcast, and the entire concept was reworked before Mr. Terrific finally debuted in January of 1967. According to reports, Young was so deeply hurt and bitter about being replaced that he allegedly refused to ever discuss the show in interviews for the rest of his life, treating the entire experience as something he wanted to forget rather than a near miss in his television career. Fact 13. Bob Newhart guest starred as a Hugh Hefner-type character. Years before he became a household name with his own sitcoms, Bob Newhart made a memorable guest appearance on Captain Nice in an episode that showcased his ability to play against type. Newhart portrayed a wealthy nightclub owner who was clearly modeled after Hugh Hefner, complete with a pipe and a slimy, self-satisfied demeanor that was quite different from the nervous, stammering characters he would later become famous for playing. The episode featured Captain Nice and Sergeant Candy Kane protecting this conceited nightclub owner from gangsters who were trying to kill him, which led to some classic physical comedy and perfectly timed Newhart delivery. In one particularly funny scene, Sergeant Kane knocks Newhart's character to the floor to save him from a falling light fixture that could have seriously injured him, and immediately after saving his life, she asks him if he's all right. Newhart, lying on the ground with his characteristic deadpan timing, responds with the line, "All right, I'm darn near perfect," which brought down the house with its combination of physical humor and his dry delivery. The episode also included subtle adult humor that parents might not have caught, as it was essentially a spoof of Hefner's Playboy empire, with the show replacing Playboy bunnies with women dressed as apples to make it appropriate for the family audience that Captain Nice was supposedly targeting. Fact 14. The German DVD release butchered the episodes. For decades, Captain Nice has been nearly impossible to find in any official home video release in the United States, but fans hoping the German DVD release would solve that problem were in for a disappointing surprise. The show was released on DVD in Germany by Pedax Film Media on August 5, 2011, under the translated title Das Geheimnis der blauen Tropfen, which means The Secret of the Blue Drops in English, referring to Carter Nash's super serum. However, this release turned out to be a nightmare for anyone hoping to preserve or enjoy the series in its original form, because the episodes were heavily and inexplicably edited down from their original runtime. While the original episodes ran approximately 24 minutes each, some episodes on the German DVD were cut down to just 14 minutes, meaning that nearly half of the content had been removed for reasons that were never explained. The editing wasn't just trimming for time or removing commercials, entire scenes, jokes, and plot. Points were simply gone, leaving viewers with incomplete and often confusing episodes that didn't flow properly. To make matters worse, the German release included only a German-language audio track with no English-language option available, which meant that even English-speaking fans who purchased the set couldn't hear the original performances or dialogue. The show was later released again in Germany as a double package with Mr. Terrific, but it suffered from the same problems with heavy editing and missing English audio. Fact 15. A TV critic accused it of being a homosexual plot. The critical reception of Captain Nice included one of the most bizarre and paranoid reviews in television history, according to creator Buck Henry himself. Years after the show's cancellation, Henry recalled in interviews that a major television critic had accused Captain Nice of being a homosexual plot to take over America, a claim so outlandish and absurd that it perfectly captured the strange atmosphere of 1960s television criticism and Cold War-era paranoia. Henry expressed frustration that he could never locate the actual review to show people just how ridiculous it was, but he maintained that this accusation had indeed been made by a prominent critic at the time. The idea that a silly sitcom about a bumbling superhero in pajamas could somehow be part of a conspiracy to undermine American society seems laughable today, but it reflected the very real anxieties and moral panics that surrounded television content during that era, when critics and advocacy groups were constantly looking for hidden meanings and subversive messages in entertainment. Despite having the pedigree of being created by Buck Henry, who had just come off the massive success of Get Smart, and despite receiving generally kinder reviews than its rival Mr. Terrific, Captain Nice couldn't overcome the obstacles of poor scheduling, network competition, and the rapidly imploding superhero craze, lasting only 15 episodes before disappearing into television history.